Okay, I hope you're all set to go. It's almost 9:30 in New York, so I think that without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker of the day. Okay, would that be all right with you, Carolina? Are you going to be set to go? You will? Okay, so then let me just say something about Carolina. We have known her now for several years, and she's been a real innovator in terms of philosophical practice. She began her practice in Lebanon, where she was residing, and opened a clinical philosophy practice in Lebanon. I believe the first, almost certainly the first such practice in Lebanon, and has recently relocated to Atlantic, Canada, a very beautiful part of Canada, the province of Nova Scotia. Some of you know it, and she's based there now. So Carolina surprises us every year. She's a PhD certified member of APPA. She's now a member of the Canadian Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy. She's a pioneer in clinical philosophy wherever she resides, and she does critical thinking and neuro-linguistic programming, among other things. She's a trainer, researcher, author, and always a very interesting speaker. So, Carolina, I welcome you, and I'm going to ask if you require assistance with your presentation, or if you're able to. Shall I make you a co-host if you want to share the screen with us? Yeah, let me do that right away. If I'm able to do this. How do I make you a co-host? Let's see. Make co-host. Okay. So I think now you have the ability to share your screen with us. And just let me read for everyone. The title of your paper is Aesthetic Tools for Freeing the Mind in Philosophical Practice. So welcome, Carolina, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lou. Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you today. Many thanks for the APPA to let us share our thoughts, our philosophical practice, and our experience annually. As you know, every one of us has his own problem and feels sometimes stuck and unable to emerge from this problem. So the need of confronting becomes the only way to reach the understanding that could lead progressively to the freedom. It's like someone who's exploring the cave of his beliefs, and suddenly a big rock closes the entrance. So to move the rock, he needs many kind of tools. For today, I will talk about the aesthetic tools that could unblock and open our way to the light. And now I will share my screen. I think you are able now to see the screen. So the plan for this presentation will begin with an introduction. I will look with you for a quick historical evolution for the aesthetic concept. We will see together the varieties of the tools, aesthetic tools, how we use those tools in consultation, how our mind is a receptor, and how we can craft new strategies, new aesthetic strategies to go forward in our sessions with our clients. For the introduction, I would like to look with you for the beginning of the concept of aesthetic. It began with the ancient classical Greek philosophy. It was related to the beauty, was Plato, Aristotle, and Plotinus. And with the exception of the poetics and rhetoric with Aristotle. And then we moved to the concept of beauty, tragedy, and sublimity with the combined mode between the ancient Greek philosophy and the pre-modern philosophy with Plato, Aristotle, Plotinus, Augustine, Thomas Aquinas. And then all this situation prepared to the flowering in the High Renaissance and the early modern period with the influence of Plato and Aristotle. And we can see all this movement in Italy and in the Europe and over the world. And then the big step was with Kant, when the aesthetic took a logical and philosophical distinctive role. It took the shape of analysis, logic, with the critic of judgment, of the judgment with Kant. It was like taking all the shape to a creative and genius freedom, to a moral function that can be put in our daily lives. So it's about it was about a reflexive import of pertinent judgment on the meaning of our lives. And we arrived to the romantic hermeneutics that took another kind of aesthetic form. Kant influenced Hegel, Hume, Schelling, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and Freud. And with the 20th century and up, between the continental European and the Anglo-American aesthetic, the thinkers focused their attention on these points. First, the cognitive sources pertinent to arts, the analysis of artistic expressions, the conceptual relation between art and craft, the production of art and the full consideration of authenticity, creativity, and freedom, and the relationship between theoretical and the practical intelligence related to aesthetics. So we are talking about a big period of time with Jean-Paul Sartre, Merleau-Ponty, Paul Ricoeur, Dufresne, John Dewey, Wittgenstein, de Saussure, and many others that influence all the history of aesthetics. So the evolution is like that, from the beauty and the pleasantness and the relation to senses with the poetic and rhetoric, to the beauty and sublimity and tragedy and the critic of judgment, and the philosophical, logical, distinctive role, the related way to the meaning of our lives, hermeneutic language, analysis, interpretation, cognition, imagination, theory, practice, and all the scheme is related to the freedom, the authenticity, and the creativity. So if you want to look now after the full history resume for this evolution, we can see now that we have many varieties of aesthetic tools. So for me, I defined an aesthetic tool in philosophical counseling, every type of cognitive, imaginative, interpretative stimulator that could be used as means of understanding, because it includes signification, implication, symbolization. It could be the authentic bridge to the sui generis, to the uniqueness to everyone. It could be a vivid channeling to clarity, willpower, a great move from passive to active thinking, and we will see how. It could be the providing mode to the malleability to act and the possibility to move the obstacles through different perspectives. So now we will see together the types of aesthetic tools. It could be related to an image, to short films, to paintings, words, text, short stories, tales, fables, creative monologues, emojis, designation when it's about kids' situation. It could be metaphors or any speech figure. It could be geometric presentations, axis, timeline. I would like to mention that in the case of images, the double illusion images help the mind to see different perspectives. They are great tools used to fortify the confidence in certain type of cases. And I would like to mention too that within my experience, I noticed that the metaphor, the analogism, the similes, the popular quotes are the most preferable and appreciated tools that can give the counselees a bright and clear understanding. Now I will talk about the usage in consultation. And here is the big part of what's inside. So our sensations are related, as you know, to our brain that stimulates our imagination and our thoughts. This stimulation can trigger deep inside many accumulated and hidden emotion and then pushes them to the line of confrontation. To confront, we need a full consciousness of the real situation and a strategy that could lead to a special reasoning in order to moderate the crucial confrontation. From the awareness of the need to be fully conscious to the figuration followed by the creation of links, there is a whole procedure that requires a deep, deep work. The first perspective is how to define more than one liaison between the initial sensation that stimulated the pleasantness of or the drama in the personal narration on one hand, and its replacement by the related interpretation and logical reasoning on the other hand. So when using an aesthetic tool during the session, this using relates each person's story to an intra-temporal fusion that transforms the aesthetic tool to an extra-temporal value adapted to multiple cultures, different cases, and in many perspectives. How? And what happens? Our mind is a receptor. When using an aesthetic tool, the imagination is in fact brought into play. The mind appears to be an active receptor. Its activity develops a type of liaison in grouping what is already perceived with a new added significance. The mind is involved in receiving the sign to be the cognitive bridge, while the imagination combines the influence of the aesthetic tool with the cognition state in order to facilitate the understanding. The aesthetic experience involves a free play of the imagination and this understanding, like Kant said. This way of thinking creates new margins of active thoughts that progressively eliminate the ambiguity. In fact, it is not about eliminating the ambiguity, but it's about awakening the power of critical reasoning that was locked in only focusing on the problem. So it resembles a little bit to the active reasoning schematized in the hermeneutic circle that determines the three levels of mimesis: the perceived and the prefigured, the configured through the aesthetic tool, and the refigured after the formed liaison and the built understanding. This refiguration that results after the usage of the aesthetic tool implies the activity of the mind and its ability to create new adjusted habits influenced by a new horizon of thoughts. So when the mind is now ready, we are about crafting new aesthetic strategies. And here I would like to talk about many remarks from my experience. When we use an aesthetic tool, the counselor takes it as a nice part that deviates their thoughts to something that differs from their problem. The mind, as a receptor, moves to a kind of play that motivates its capacity to adapt. The new activity contributes to a new challenge, a valid concentration, and a new type of reasoning. The mind becomes free to explore and to craft many aesthetic strategies through new perspective for the new purpose. Once adapted to the creative aesthetic experience, the counselor feels confident and readjusts the will to move forward. The natural capacity of the mind tends to see and replace every figure by a clue, and then manipulates all the clues to create and rebuild new perspectives. Every perspective creates new possibilities and infinite reformulations in order to unblock the conceptualization, the identification, the understanding, and the action. I would like to mention that in every aesthetic tool, image, metaphor, speech figure, popular quote, citation, text, Buddhist and Zen, or any religious text, short film, painting, double illusion, there is always a figure that contains the three mimesis cited in slide 12. I will share with you some images to see how the client, how the counselee can be adapted to this system of aesthetic tool. Let's see together the famous man of absurd and the rebellious man. This figure is from the Atlas de la Philosophie. And Camus introduced it as the rebellious system of the Sisyphe myth. So when I introduce this figure, this image to a client, a counselee, some of those counselees just see the mountain and the hard way. Others can see only the hard work of the man who is taking the big rock. Others can see only the victory. Others can see only the crowd down the man who has the victory. And others can read all the situation as the hard work, keep going, we can achieve, and everyone will pass by the same situation. So every counselee has his own look, his own thinking, his own liaison to his situation, to his problem. And then it's not about it's right and it's not right. Yes, it is about this kind of interpretation, or no, it's not about this kind of interpretation. It's opened in a way that every counselee can situate himself in this image. That's why the value of this image becomes extra-temporal. The counselee is going into an intra-temporal situation. He is mixed. He emerges from his problem to an intra-temporal situation, and then this way he can see more than one perspective. We will look together now for this image, the late show posted by Raseanu Mihai Adrian on Twitter. When we look to this image, we can see many, many things. I would like to mention here when I want to listen to the counselee and to every interpretation of the counselee, I don't look to make a psychological interpretation. I'm using this kind of aesthetic tools to open the way to understanding. I'm using this kind of tools to make a clue for the counselee to go forward, to dare to think, because it's about something repeated always in the sessions. Many of the clients cannot talk directly, cannot make a conceptualization to their problem, cannot say, I want myself to be liberated, cannot move forward without this kind of tool to let them just feel free. We are about freeing their mind. Just tell me what you see in this image. And all those images, all the metaphors, all the kind of pushing, of stimulating the thinking, the reasoning, will let us go forward. And the counselee feels himself, I'm free to see, I'm free to interpret it, and I'm free to make many interpretation, many thoughts. I'm not limited to say my problem is like that I want to manage that issue. It's about to go to the problem with the help of a nice play, a nice stimulator that is an image, a figure, a talk, a quote, a popular citation, and etc. Let's see those two pictures. I would like to mention with the first one for Igor Morsky, the Polish serial artist. This image typically opened for many times, many windows to see over the problem or the issue that we want to talk about with the counselee, that we want to let the counselee feel liberated about it, that help to let the counselee understand it's about what. Why? Because this picture is related to our life. It's not about only the nature, it's about our mind. And this shape of mind made as trees with different seasons helped the counselee to see why it's so natural to have a problem, to feel ourselves in the autumn or in the winter or in the spring of our life, of our thoughts. And if you want to talk about the second image, the persistence of memory, this picture too opened many perspectives to go forward and manage many issues with the expert channeling of questioning and reasoning that I led with many counselees. So it's about images here, but I'm not talking only about images. I'm talking about all kind of aesthetic tool. And an aesthetic tool helps the counselor to have many opened windows and to see how the experience, the accumulated experience, could be registered as an intratemporal philosophical experience. It's not about one counselee. It's not about the numbers. It's about this connection between the counselor and the counselee that made all this tool work. We cannot put an image and just say to the counselee, what do you see in? It's about this expert questioning that can lead the counselee to free his mind, to liberate himself, and to push for another type, another level of reasoning that could help to solve his problem. Let's talk now about the dark rabbit illusion of Wittgenstein. The phenomenon is called aspect perception. And it's a little proof that everyone can have his own perception. It's not about to have a classical, typical perceptions. And every mind is ready to see a perception. And then this aspect could be related to the thoughts, to the way of thinking, the way of understanding, to how we can see and look forward to resolve all the problems. Finally, to schematize our aesthetical work as counselor, yes, our work is aesthetical work. It is aesthetical and ethical, and it is so important to know that what we do, what we did, what we do and will do is very important for the whole humanity. So for that, I will present this figure of wind turbines. The main components, as you know, of each wind turbine are the foundation, the tower, rubber hub, including 3 blades, the nacelle, and the generator. Every counselee has their own foundation, their own status, their own culture, their own knowledge, their own beliefs, their own values, all together influence the counselee's mind. Effectively, we are the wind that motivates their mind to understand, to decide, to choose, to activate their will, and to increase their power as a result. Thus, their mind sends a great signal to the big generator, the brain. That's why most of our clients suffer from anxiety. And when we use this kind of tools, they feel themselves like, in other words, another type of thinking. Where is our problem? Why it was a problem? Why? Because the mind as receptor was taking all the tools between the aesthetic tools and the questioning and all the expertise of the counselor to put it in place and to let this person who suffers from anxiety, let's say, for example, sees another type of thinking, another critical mode. This critical mode is essential to let them move, to let them know there is a possibility to see another thing than our anxiety. We should know that every time we help a counselee to move forward or to understand, we help him to move from his problem to another part of himself that he needs to know there is another type of place, there is another type of situation that could be found in myself other than the anxiety or the problem. So this is how together counselors and counselees we participate in enlightening the humanity with our philosophical practice. And then now you're listening was the sun that enlightened my talk. Thank you so much.
Hey, Carolina, great talk. Can I shift to a gallery view and let's all give Carolina a virtual show of appreciation. This is what it looks like on Zoom. A big round of applause. Thank you so much, Carolina. Great talk. And it's time for a coffee break. Okay, please come back.